Anyway, big round of applause for Tom. Thank you so much. Thank you.
Cheers, Ronnie. Woof. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. It is an absolute pleasure to be here with you today, and as Bernardo has kind of alluded to, I'm going to spend the next 30 minutes sharing some of my top tips, which are based in NLP, to help you to negotiate like a drug dealer. I don't know if you've noticed, there's a bit of a theme going on, isn't there? We've had Kate talking about her experience with drugs, we've had Ruth talking about Kenneth, her angel drug dealer, and here I am teaching you how to negotiate like a drug dealer. I'm sure it's all purely a subconscious thing. If you're wondering why I'm qualified to talk about negotiating like a drug dealer, well, as Bernardo's mentioned, I spent the first 18 years of my career working in pharmaceuticals, in sales, in marketing, and in training. And I did literally negotiate and sell millions of pounds worth of drugs during that time. In 2008, set up my first training company, TLP, and that's gone from strength to strength, so we are 10 years old today. Primarily focusing on the pharmaceutical industry back then, but over the years I started to get more and more work with the NHS, and as a result of that, back in 2015, I set up a subdivision of TLP, which is called Your Training In-House, and that just focuses purely on providing training courses and coaching to the NHS. So I spend a lot of my time working with doctors, working with nurses, working with pharmacists, giving them all the soft skills that they don't actually get a lot of in the NHS. If you've ever wondered why your doctor has such bad bedside manner, it's because they've never been trained to communicate. As Bernardo's also alluded to, one thing that's been kind of consistent and constant throughout all my time as a kind of entrepreneur, if you like, is my love of NLP. So I did my first practitioner course back in 2008. I then went on to do a business practitioner course. I've done my master practitioner twice in this very room with Richard, with Kathleen, with John. And in 2016, I thought, you know what, I really want to take this to the next level. So I went over to Orlando, I got my train the trainer badge, and that made me decide to launch my own NLP company in January this year. So NLP by TLP is again picking up business slowly but surely, and we're going from strength to strength. Now, when I did my trainer training, I thought, this is it. This is the pinnacle of my self-development. I felt epic. I didn't think it was going to get any better, but it did, because again, as Bernardo's mentioned, I was one of the lucky people who about 15 months ago got to go into the mentorship program with Richard. So imagine what that's like, having direct access to the man himself, monthly Skype calls, meetings face-to-face in London when he's here. So that's May and October, but also we went out to Dallas, we met him on his home ground. It has just been a phenomenal experience. And as Bernardo said, I thought I was good before I started working with Richard. I thought I was confident before I started working with Richard. But right now, I am on fire. The world is my oyster, and I'm looking forward to see where the next 10 years takes me. So as well as my love of NLP, there is another passion that I have that pervades all of my life. For those of you who are familiar with English accents, you may have spotted that I am from Liverpool. I am a Scouser. A Scouser that sells drugs, ladies and gentlemen. It doesn't get much better. Okay, so we are in good company as we go through the rest of the day. Now, I'm really, really passionate about all things to do with Liverpool because it's a great city full of great people, and we have a very, very rich history. We are famous for lots of things. If I was to ask you what Liverpool is famous for, what would you say? What springs to mind? Just shout out. What is the Beatles? Absolutely. The mop top four. Now, not only is Liverpool famous for the Beatles, but Liverpool is actually recognized by the Guinness Book of Records as being the city on the planet that has produced more #1 artists, more #1 bands, and more #1 singles than any other city on the planet. So yeah, we have a great musical heritage. What else is Liverpool famous for? Football, yes! Just in case you've been living on the moon for the last week, you may have noticed that my boys have just qualified for the Champions League final. So my week is absolutely epic right now. My team are in the Champions League final. You're from Roma. Oh, I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry. But it was never a penalty, was it? It was never a penalty. Okay, that's all right. Don't anchor on the Rome fan. Don't anchor. Okay. So yeah. So we have the football. Anything else? What else is Liverpool famous for? The docks. Who said that? Kate, thank you very much. Yeah, so Liverpool is famous for lots of different parts of its architecture. And in particular, Liverpool is famous for being one of the few cities in the world that has 2 cathedrals. So we have 2 cathedrals. We have the old Anglican cathedral that looks just like a big church, as you would expect it to look like. But we also have the more modern Catholic cathedral. Yeah, and this, I think, looks anything other than a cathedral or a church or a place of worship. I mean, it just, to me as a child, I thought this was a space station. I thought this was where NASA used to launch their rockets from, because I thought that the Apollo rockets would stand there quite nicely and off they would go on their moon missions and they would come back. Now, I know we're laughing because it's a bit of a funny story about a thick kid growing up in Liverpool, but this did actually cause my parents quite a few problems when I was a child. And the reason it caused them problems was this. So let me ask you another question. Where did NASA used to launch the Apollo rockets from? Cape Canaveral, absolutely, thank you. Where in the world is Cape Canaveral? Florida. What other world-famous resort is in Florida? Disney World, absolutely. So in my child's mind's eye, in my map of the world, if this was Cape Canaveral and this was in the middle of Liverpool, Disney World was just on the other side of the city. It was a taxi ride away. And so I was constantly nagging my parents to say, take me to Disney World, take me to Disney World. And obviously back in the 70s, we didn't have cheap airfare or package holidays like we had now. And they would say no. So I thought I had the meanest parents in the world, okay, simply because of my beliefs and my map of the territory at that point. Now, my best friend, who I've known for nearly 50 years, so he was a kid back in the day with me in Liverpool, he didn't see the cathedral, he didn't see the space station, he thought that this was a wigwam, okay? He thought that this was where all of the indigenous Red Indian population of Liverpool used to live. And actually, locally and in some of the places, it is affectionately referred to as Paddy's Wigwam. Because if you kind of look at it, yeah, it's a little bit like a wigwam, and it was actually built by an Irish labour force. And we know, or hopefully we know, that we call Irish people paddies with affection. The other interesting thing is that this is right next to the Irish Centre in Liverpool. So on St. Patrick's Day, there will be lots of drunken Irish people and pretend Irish people, because we all pretend to be Irish on St. Patrick's Day, don't we? All gathered round the cathedral. Okay, now there is a reason that I'm telling you this story, and basically, this is one of the first things that I want to share with you when it comes to being an effective negotiator. If you understand NLP, you'll know that one of the basic presuppositions is that the map is not the territory. No two of us ever see the world in the same way. We never experience the world in the same way. And that lends itself massively to being a successful negotiator, because if we can put ourselves into the shoes of our customers, our clients, our colleagues, our managers, anybody that we have to negotiate with, we have a far better chance of getting a successful outcome. Because if we can see things from their point of view, if we can see their map of the world, we can understand what's important to them. And then we can begin to think win-win. Now, I know win-win is a very cliched term, but in negotiation terms, it has real meaning and real significance, because what we're talking about here is, what do I want? If I can get everything from this negotiation, what does that look like? What do I need? So what's the minimum amount I need to get out of my effort and the time that I've put into this negotiation? And then we have a range of options that will be anywhere in between. So we think about this from our point of view, but it's also really important when we're planning a negotiation to think about this from the other person's point of view, whether that's a customer, a client, a colleague, whoever it is. We should be thinking win-win at every opportunity. So the next tip I'm going to share with you, I call getting to yes quickly. So this doesn't mean that within 5 minutes of entering into the negotiation, you have to get an agreement. But if we can start to get little yeses as we go along, we are more likely to get the bigger yeses that we want when we ask for a commitment. I'm going to show you a video clip now. This is probably one of the most famous sets of yeses that has ever graced the silver screen. So just watch this. Sorry? Yes, no, not quite, but that would have been a good choice. Thank you. Some of you might recognize this. Incredibly, this film will be 30 years old next year, so some of us are going to be feeling really old by the end of this. But let's just watch this and then we'll talk about it. Okay, so how many of us would like to get our customers, our colleagues, our clients saying yes that enthusiastically? Yeah, okay. How many of us would like to learn a technique that comes directly from NLP that allows us to do that? Yeah. How many of you would like me to share that technique with you right now? Well, we've just done it, ladies and gents. This is what's called a yes set. So the way that this works is if we can get small agreements at the start of a conversation or the start of a negotiation, we can get our clients, our customers, our colleagues saying yes to little things. We've then got a far greater chance of getting them saying yes to the bigger things that we're going to ask for further down the line. So what we're looking for is 3 or 4 generic, non-challenging statements that the subconscious will not disagree with. Okay, so you may not physically see people saying yes, but inside their head, they will be agreeing with you. And here's a fairly generic example that I use a variation of this when I'm meeting clients for the first time. So I'll say something like, thank you for seeing Mr. Smith. I appreciate that we're both busy. Now, Mr. Smith's not going to be sitting there thinking, I'm not busy. I just want to see you for the fun of it. Okay. So subconsciously, he's already saying yes. There's my first yes. Then I might say, I understand that we've got 30 minutes together. I know we'll both want these 30 minutes to be as effective or as productive as possible. Again, his subconscious isn't going to disagree with that. He wants that time to be as effective as possible. And then finally, I might say something like, I help lots of businesses like yours to be even more successful. And I'm sure that you, like most business people, myself included, want to be successful. Again, his subconscious isn't going to argue with that. Why wouldn't he want to be successful? 3 yeses, and then we can start to move on. And the more yeses that we collect as we go through the conversation, the easier it will be to get the bigger yeses towards the end of the process. This is a great way to get upgrades on flights, ladies and gentlemen. Yeah, if you want to know what my technique is, come and talk to me later on and I will share it with you. Okay. So yes set's really important. The next technique that I want to share with you is about working out the variables. So these are the things that allow you to negotiate and move possibly from what you want towards what you need. There will always be a range of variables that are involved. And again, I'm going to show you another video clip. This is an expert negotiator in full flight. As you watch this video, notice the variables that he uses to trade to get to what he wants. Okay, so hopefully none of us are married to a guy like that, but you never know. So it's really important to work out your variables in advance. What are the things that you can trade, that you can use during the negotiation if the person that you're negotiating with, whether it's a customer, a client, a colleague, starts to kind of ask you to make concessions? And there are usually lots of things that we can work with. Maybe it's the size of an order, maybe it's the contract length that you're looking for, response time, if you're selling equipment or maintenance, rather equipment that has to be maintained and you need to go out and maintain it, that could be a negotiable. Delivery time, all of these things allow us to maneuver during the negotiations. The last thing you really want to start thinking about reducing is cost. If you really believe that you're providing a value service or a value product, why would you negotiate and bring the cost down? There are so many of the things that we can work with before we get to that point. And then the final thing that I want to share with you, ladies and gentlemen, is that there are times when you will be prepared, and you have to be prepared to go oops. And what I'm talking about here is your opt-out point. There will be times when the best thing you can do is walk away from the negotiating table, because if what the other person or the other party is asking you for takes you below what you need, then it's not worth doing it. In fact, if you go below what you need, that's going to damage you. It's going to damage you financially. It's going to damage you personally, because you will walk away from that negotiation table. You'll start to beat yourself up. You'll be thinking, why did I agree to that? You've then got to invest time and effort in delivering on whatever it is that you just agreed to that you didn't want to agree to. And you've got to go back and see that colleague, or you've got to go back and see that client at some point. And you're already beginning to resent them. And it's not their fault. It's your fault because you agreed to something that you shouldn't have agreed to. Now, we know from NLP that behavior breeds behavior. If you get into the habit of agreeing to things that aren't really the things that you should be agreeing to, you're probably more likely to continue to do that. But if you get into the habit of walking away from the negotiation table when it's not a good deal for you or your company or your team or whoever it is, then that becomes very empowering, and you learn to walk away in the future should you need to. So don't be afraid to walk away. But again, a lot of this is in the preparation. If you know what you need, that's the minimum you need to get from the negotiation, and you have that in mind. If that client, that customer, whoever it is, starts to ask you for things that take you below that, then be prepared to walk away. You don't have to be nasty, you don't have to be aggressive about it. You can just say, look, this isn't going to work for us, so let's stop wasting our time, and I will see you at some point in the future. And I can guarantee when you do that, you will see them at some point in the future. In my experience, 80% of the people I've said no to come back and say, you know what, actually, Tom, we really kind of need to work with you, and we want to work with you. It's interesting that lots of companies get me in to talk about negotiation skills programs and then expect me not to negotiate with them. How does that work? All right. To summarize, the map is not the territory. Yeah? If you can put yourself into the perspective, the shoes of your customer, your client, your colleagues, whoever it is that you're negotiating with, you're in a far better situation to be able to create those win-win scenarios. Get to yes quickly. Think about your yes sets. Start to generate those little yeses as soon as you can and collect them as you go through the negotiation process. Work out your variables, list them, rank them, and then trade your least expensive or your least costly variables, first of all, if you have to trade anything. And finally, don't be prepared, or rather don't be afraid to go oops. Be prepared to walk away if you have to, because the last thing you want to do is agree to something that doesn't suit you financially, doesn't suit you from an ethics point of view, whatever it is, you just do not want to do that. Okay, so quick plug, here's the website. If you go to www.nlpbytlp.com, you'll see all the details of our negotiation skills program, plus of all our other programs. Now, here's a challenge, ladies and gents. Once you've had a look around and you decide, yeah, I really want to go on that program, but you're looking at it and you're thinking, but I really can't afford it, then my challenge to you now is come and negotiate with me. All right? Yeah? You never know. There may be things that you can provide that I need, or possibly even that I want, or that my colleagues need, or that they want, that we can start to negotiate over. Thank you.